Look how messy my background looks. Hi, everybody, and welcome. It is Friday, of course, so it seemed like a good opportunity to, again, talk to you guys. I'm really excited about some things that are up and coming. But first, I wanted to basically read somebody's comment from the last time we spoke, because I thought that what they had to say added to the conversation and allows me an opportunity to clarify what I mean. How's everybody doing before I jump in, though? Hi, Brad. Okay, let me see if I can find the comment. All right, so this comment was from formerly Rod Line. They say that your thoughts are interesting and I enjoy hearing your perspective. I have to disagree about much of what you said about kids in school. From both a parent and educator's perspective, children need boundaries and structure. That is not to say physical punishment is ever acceptable. Yes, children need room to explore and be themselves. But thanks again for your thoughts and arguments. They're very valuable to hear. And I agree 100% with this comment. I don't think that it's too far off what I was intending at any rate. I didn't mean to. So last time we talked about a whole host of things, but at some point in the video, I started talking about how our education system works in the United States, at least, and the amount of wiggle room children are given as far as if they do not follow the rules 100% and things like that. And my argument was that the rules are very stringent and there's not a lot of wiggle room there. In addition to that, my other problem with the education system that I see is actually more important necessarily than the rule is the time that is spent on being in the classroom and specifically learning. I think it's too long. I don't think that anybody should be expected to have the attention span of a super adult who barely has an attention span of, you're good if you get an hour out of somebody. So that's my thing. I didn't mean to imply that they didn't need structure. I feel that structure and boundaries are a bit different from rules and regulations, even though there's overlap. There's overlap, though, of course. A lot of people are saying hello, and Char, why y'all have such difficult names? Char Ansebel said hello. Christy Santiago, in relation to what I just said I agree. Brad Bloom is offering that they demand a greater attention span from kindergartners than the president, for fuck's sake. Yep. I think that is telling. I mean, whether that's telling about how our president is, or if it's telling about the structure of our education system, you can take it both ways, but I think they're both need some work. That being said, I am going to proceed with getting off that topic now and what we're going to focus on today. But before I do, I am super excited about something that's coming up. The week of the 3rd of August, I plan on having a really good guest and a friend of, I guess, the show come on and join me on a live stream and talk about some of her experiences with a particular topic that I'm talking about. And so I'm super excited to do that. It's also going to premiere a standard video where I explain something. So we'll all watch that together and then hop on a live stream, maybe talk about the video a little bit, but also then go on to how she experiences it and things like that. So I am really excited about doing that. And for that reason, for all you patrons who are patiently awaiting a new video, that's my major reason as to why I have not released one yet, because I want to do it during that time. And the only time she had was the week of the 3rd. So I do apologize that I don't have a video for you. Maybe I'll get something like a little raw form, but I kind of want you guys to experience it at the same time so that we can actually actively discuss it. So you know what, just send me a message on Patreon which way you're leaning, and I will make a decision based off that. Okay, so the subject of today. Oh, God. I wrote myself some notes so that I can remember to go through things with you guys as we're talking. And I keep kind of skipping over those notes. So I also wanted to mention something about the channel, the direction that the channel is in currently, and I guess kind of my future ideas for the channel. And I think Brief Brain Snacks is perfectly capable of integrating more societal issues or societal theories into the mix of our videos, which is a lot of what I talk about during the live streams. Because I don't know if you have read the About section, but my About section says something to the effect of we look at brain, behavior, and society, which happens to rhyme with BBS. Not rhyme, but it's the same initials. Brain, behavior, society, Brief Brain Snacks. I thought that was cool. I didn't even realize that until I wrote it down. So yeah. All right. And so my idea as far as the future goes is that I would like to continue to do some of these live streams, maybe integrated with some of the more formal videos. If you guys have an opinion on this, I am more than happy to read it. In fact, I welcome it, because I just don't know what I should do. I just know that I have a lot of things to say that are not exactly neuroscience specific. I obviously live in society and have a lot of comments and observations, and I know how to get the research and know when research is good or flawed and things like that regarding more social-based research. So I think, again, I'm perfectly capable of integrating these things into the channel. If you have a problem with that, or you want to see that, even let me know. All right. So this is kind of going to be what I would argue a fuzzy series of videos or topics that I'm going to discuss. They may not be in a row, because I may, again, have a formal video on something unrelated to this. But I think that, it's particularly relevant right now. A lot of people are at least saying these things or questioning about these things. And what I'm specifically referring to is societal collapse. So in that, I'm going to address insurgency. So why address insurgency? My reasoning here is that it will allow me to kind of bypass the reasoning and ideological motivations to go straight to the behaviors of what groups of people might do during or to even cause a collapse in society. Having said that, I'll more likely be framing this in terms of the kind of shakings, like shake, and happenings within the United States. Because I know that society pretty well, I would argue, and I don't think I'm equipped to speak about other people's experiences within their own societies and cultures. I think I am equipped to do so within my own, and I do want to put in a caveat but then I'm going to completely obliterate that caveat, so take it with a grain of salt. This doesn't mean that US culture is necessarily collapsing either. And if I happen to use examples from present day, it's for the reasons that I've stated about being equipped with talking about this society over anything else, or I guess over anyone else's society. Let's see if you guys have any comments. Steven Alvarez Blues says, I like the direction you're headed with the channel. Nothing wrong with taking on a wider variety of issues. Your voice is vital. But then, because of the illness, literally my voice is like, it's like I've been smoking 10,000 cigarettes a day or something. At least that's what I hear when I talk. It can be straining. Alrighty. No comments on that? Fantastic. So before we kind of get started in talking about the behaviors, we kind of need to agree on the terminology that we're going to use, right? That would be a great starting point, at least. So let's refer to capital S society here. So what is a society? Society, as far as I understand, is a group of individuals involved in persistent social interactions, or a large group sharing the same spatial or societal territory. Typically, they are under the same political authority, and they have cultural expectations from some dominant group within that society. There are little s societies. Well, I'm saying little s societies because sometimes major s societies can be, you can see subsections of this society here and this culture here. That doesn't mean that they aren't a member of the overarching society at large. Again, just from our purposes, we're going to kind of focus more on that political idea, a society being governed by a political economy, if you will. I think it's really relevant and kind of important to ask, and I'm sorry, let me see if I have any comments. I've written like little notes here and there to say like, look at comments. All right, nothing. Okay, I think you guys kind of died. Did you die? I hope not. All right, so what is kind of the purpose of society? What is society's purpose? What is it supposed to do? Which is a question that surprisingly a lot of people haven't asked, because searching for this answer just kept coming up with like the purpose of life and whatnot, which didn't help me. But there is probably a kind of a base level definition most can easily understand and probably agree upon. If not, let me know in the comments on how you might define society, or at least the point of society's existence. So in my understanding, the purpose of society is to initially increase individual and group survival by harnessing and sharing resources and abilities of individuals, which makes total sense. You have a collection of people coming in to say, hey, it's dangerous by ourselves as individuals, plus we're unable to mate. So let's get all together, and for the purposes of not only continuing our species, but making sure we have, I guess, individuals who are able to continue the species. So it makes total sense as to why people would form societies. I think people have forgotten this or don't realize that this is a point of society, because I don't see that happening often within the United States. Again, these subcultures certainly do this, but from the dominant culture at hand, I don't think that they kind of believe society is here for this. I don't know what they think. I don't know what they believe the point of society is, but they definitely don't abide by this as far as you know, like it's a collectivist thing, right? An egalitarian thing. And definitely they don't agree with that. So there might be some other definition you guys can come up with. All right. So what then do I mean by the fall of society or societal collapse? So societal collapse is considered to have occurred when a society ceases to exist, when a society actually regresses or reverts, maybe the decline to the point that no one literate is left behind. So the society loses the ability to record itself. That would be considered a reversion or regression. And also when a society gets absorbed by another. So this one's a little bit interesting as far as the examples that I saw. So I'm going to kind of use those examples in a broader sense. So in this example, it may be when a society loses the basic principle at its core, like say democracy, and then transforms into, let's say, an authoritarian dictatorship. This is an interesting dynamic too, because societal collapse traditionally accompanies less restrictions, less centralization of power, but authoritarian dictatorships accompany more restrictions and more centralization of power. And it's this aspect that I'm interested in focusing on, this absorption piece. Let's see what you guys are saying. Supreme Scientist, in my, I guess in response to me asking or saying what the purpose of society is, or society's function, says, right, the purpose is creating and maintaining long-term health, stability, and human flourishing. Yeah, I would agree with that. Obviously, I do agree with that. Okay, so Majufi says that collapse happens when people no longer get any benefit from being subject to the rules. We're going to get to that too. That's an interesting point, and thank you for bringing it up. So now let's look at kind of what can cause it. And to be fair, some of these causes I don't really understand. So you can maybe enlighten me here, because I was not able to find, you know, coherent examples of it. So one of the causes of societal collapse, and again, it could be a multitude of these things happening at once too, it is environmental, so such as droughts or caused by climate change, or a pandemic like COVID. Another cause of collapse could be the depletion of resources. This I can kind of think is when, like, say, you live in a small mining town, but then all the mining ore becomes extracted. There is no longer a need and ability, essentially, to live in that mining town because there's no longer funds coming in. And so a lot of people just disperse and move out of that town. You can't extract it from the ground anymore because you've already extracted everything that it had. This is one I don't really understand, and it was loss of creativity. I don't understand this one. I couldn't really find, again, cogent examples of this. So all I could essentially think that this means is maybe a loss of the arts, maybe a loss, again, of writing, because that is considered an art. I don't know. I don't know what that means. So if you have any ideas as to what that means, again, let me know. A supreme scientist says creative solutions to problems. Yeah, that could be it. I can totally see that. I'm just wondering if that is not indicative of another issue or another thing at play as far as what these causes are, or these causes, right? Another one I don't think will surprise anybody here, which it is rising inequality. Say there's rising inequality in income and wealth. It creates tension among its citizenry, no doubt. And lastly, not lastly, but second to last, there is an unsustainable cohesion within the society. That's not what it is. Unsustainable complexity, like your society becomes, I guess, too complex to maintain and manage. So this was something that I was reading on kind of the collapse of democracy in and of itself. And it kind of, in its own way, highlighted this idea. So I was reading an article, and it was basically by a researcher, I guess a sociologist, who predicts that democracy, at least in the United States, won't last. I don't know how far out that prediction is, because I couldn't have access to the main article. I had to read a summary of it, or I had to read someone else's reading of that article. And so that's interesting, but I don't know. It's possible for sure, and I'm sure people are kind of feeling like we are headed in that direction. I know that I am, at any rate. So in that, it was because democracy is hard. You need people that are very, very, very intelligent to maintain that system. Why do you need people who are intelligent? It's because you have a lot of things going on at once. It's not a small scale society where you can just, say, hey, my neighbor just stole my hammock or something like that, and then retrieve it. You don't, in some cases, you don't know who stole your hammock. You can't even ascertain who did it because there's so many people. And there's so many people with the idea of people-controlled society, right? And so you have to maintain election integrity, trust among the citizenry has to be maintained. And this is not something that is easily done. In fact, I would argue that if you're dumb, this is near impossible to do. But in that article, he was arguing that clearly, and this was in 2014 or something, but he was arguing, clearly, the citizenry, it was very snobbish, I have to admit, are too unintelligent to be able to maintain this themselves. And I think he made that assumption or idea based off of who was voting, being voted into office. And at that, I would argue that it's a little bit more complex than that. But let's not, it's too time consuming to get into that. Okay. Where was I? I'm just seeing if you guys have any comments here and which one I want to read. So if you will excuse me on this. All right. And lastly, before I read one of your comments, there is the decay of social cohesion. So all this means is there's a lot of infighting, right? Again, there's that trust is broken. Then that trust can be among different factions in society. Trust can be between society and its overarching government. It doesn't matter, as long as there's infighting, that could potentially cause a collapse in society. So there's a lot, but we're gonna move on from that. Christy Santiago says Chris Hedges warned all who would listen, America is doing its farewell tour. Hopefully our military's occupations end, colonialism ends, and hopefully there will be no more empires. Yeah, I don't know if the United States were to collapse, I'm not sure that would end empire building, because there are other nations that have expressed interest in spreading out. You've got China and Russia as the major ones, or the major players, who have indicated that they would like to replace the United States's, I guess, standing. They would like to replace it in thought and behaviors, in I guess, world global norms, if you will. So I don't think empire building would stop, but certainly American empire building would be impossible to maintain. Okay, so that's a lot, but let's move on to kind of group behaviors that may be indicative of a declining society on its way to collapse. But I'm going to look at it within kind of that absorption context. And we're going to look at first insurgency. So insurgencies, definition-wise, it is solely a political military kind of struggle toward subverting or displacing the legitimacy of a constituted government. Insurgencies basically want control over the population. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you didn't think I was going there to insurgencies, did you? I think not. So how do they seek out this control? Like, what are the mechanisms in which they can use? Insurgents seek this control over the population by essentially undercutting the government's ability to, well, there's several, but this can be all at once or individual. Undercutting the government's ability to provide services to the public, like education services and justice, fair justice to its citizenry, where the citizenry maintains trust in that overarching government. In this, it may do so by kind of offering either alternatives to, like, private schools is an alternative to government-funded, well, taxpayer-funded education. Or they may simply portray the governments as basically incompetent, which also happens a lot. Sometimes it is, but happens a lot. Another thing that they want to do is gain acceptance of the population via creating either sympathizers, so those people who agree with them, agree with that movement, agree with that ideology, or through threats of violence and fear once they have control over a populace. So it's kind of like once the insurgencies or the insurgency has kind of, in a weird way, won, they maintain that control, or at least one within a certain area. They do the population control through basically threat of violence. Sorry. They try to undermine international support of the government. If possible, they also want to gain international support for their insurgent government. They also may want to provoke the government into committing abuses, atrocities against the citizenry to further delegitimize the government. The insurgent government may commit these same abuses once established in order to rule by fear. So when they, a lot of insurgent movements, when they say that they are just appalled by these human rights violations. They're not. Above all, insurgency is a political competition for legitimacy. Let's see what you guys have to say. I didn't know that. Christy Santiago mentions that China has already been all throughout Africa. Oh, oops, sorry, your comment flipped away. God, where did it go? Okay, they're building infrastructure in return for resources and influence. Actually, I do think I read something about this years ago, actually. Not similar to what the West has done for centuries. I don't know what the dissimilarities are there, but it's probably a more like nice approach of colonization, if you will, if you want to call it nice at all, or empire building, if you will. Let's see. Oh, I don't have my water. That's what's, oh well. Okay, so how do they gain legitimacy on the international stage? And a major way they do this is, and I hate to say this, and I hate to like terrify everybody, through a civil war. So the insurgent side, in order to, I guess, be an opposing faction in this war, and also be legitimized internationally, they must be organized to the point where the structure could in and of itself be its own government. So it could stand on its own without the help of the overarching government. They already know who, let's say, their president is. This is something that was happening during the Civil War, in the United States Civil War. A whole entire government was established in the South in order to maintain slavery. So they were an insurgent faction, if you will, in the United States. Excuse me again. I'm so sorry. I'm still symptomatic, I think, of, or I don't know if damage, if it's permanent, but from having COVID, I have not lost this cough, and it's been 4 months. Almost, we're getting to the 5th month now. So it must, so the insurgent side must be its own government. It must be able to stand on its own. And essentially, it must have the same characteristics as a state. But civil wars always lead to kind of intrastate violence, which is obviously internal violence. And this is where often you see the most human rights abuses and violations is during this time, because of course, if you're fighting factions among yourself, who will know about these violations except the other side, that is, yourself. So yeah, one of the biggest tools that insurgents can actually use is propaganda, and I've made a 3-part series video on that, and maybe I should link it, but I'll link it after the discussion here. It's a big tool. A big government form of propaganda by insurgents is, and I know that some of you guys, again, will not necessarily agree with me. I do want to just tell you that this was mentioned or said by people who study this stuff, people way smarter than me. They who particularly study insurgencies. So as far as a big government form of propaganda by insurgents is promoting the idea of shadow governments. It can be the gift that keeps on giving. So if an insurgency gains power in a region or area, they can anything that they knowingly do bad or wrong or even mistakenly do so, they can blame on that shadow government and say, well, it wasn't me and it wasn't my administration. It was hangovers from a different administration because they're actually the ones ruling everything. The thing about shadow governments is that they don't really exist. People, especially in the context that I hear about shadow governments, which is always about a previous administration, you have to remember that these administrations have power and had power. So there would be no need for them to establish a shadow government. They already had all the control and power in the first place. So to point fingers and say like previous administrations are now the shadow government is bonkers. Because again, they already had power, and they still hold a lot of power too. They had the might of the military, for instance, which they could have employed at any moment. They had power. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to peek at the comments and see what you guys are saying. Oh, thank you, Brad. Brad Bloom says, bless you, Amanda, because I was having a fit. Yeah, they do. Okay, so thank you. Aaron A says that they'll find the video and link it at the end. So thank you. I'll read recommendations later. Okay, so let's move on. There are also insurgent typologies. So this means that ways insurgencies can kind of be classified so that you know what you're dealing with. There are revolutionary ones, and I don't know if you need a definition for this, but it's basically where people rise up, I guess, maybe against their current power structure and basically overhaul it completely. They aren't interested in maintaining anything that was there because maybe it needs to be changed. That's a revolutionary reformist group. A revolutionary insurgent group, not reformist group, because the next one is they're reformist. And this is more focused on specific political reform where maybe they don't really want power. They just want politically to change kind of the rules and regulations of an overarching society. And this, again, can be in totality, they want to change everything, or just things, small amounts of things. There's also a separatist insurgent movement or typology. It is what it says. It's basically they want control over their own area. They're separating from their main area that formerly controlled them or that still controls them, but again, being an insurgent group. They try to secede, say, from the Union, say, like the American Civil War, say. There's also, and this one I think is very notable here, and it's kind of disheartening as well, but there's the commercialist insurgents, and these insurgency groups are primarily motivated by gaining more wealth and resources. They're not there for societal building. They're not there for even empire building necessarily, although if their territories, if the insurgent group's territories of the main group that they're fighting against, if they have resources, they will try to maintain them at all costs because they want to gain wealth. that is their goal. So let's go here. Yeah, formerly Rod Line mentions that, pardon me if I'm wrong, but changing all of the rules of a society, isn't that a change in power then too? Yes, and that's why it's not necessarily they want direct power or control in that manner. They want the political control, but maybe someone else does. Because again, if you do change all the laws and regulations, and treaties even, you are shifting that power in some direction or another. And again, what is the point of insurgency groups but to gain power over the population in some way, shape, or form? So what does this have to do with Portland, the protests, and the police here? So let's kind of back up to where we are today. A few months ago, Black Lives Matter protests were all over the nation, if not global. It was sparked from the murder of George Floyd, basically, and I've already talked to this at some length in some of my other live streams. So you're welcome to check those out if you haven't already, because I'm not going to focus on this specifically. And so some of these protests are still happening today because the issue, believe it or not, even though the New York governor had a mural of BLM painted on the street or something, or sidewalk in front of the Trump building in New York, the problem isn't solved, believe it or not. I thought that would solve everything, but it didn't. So protests are still happening because we're still seeing people killed too. Not long after George Floyd, there was Breonna Taylor, and she was murdered in her own home. Again, police have no consequences. They face no consequences for this. So the protests continue. But what are protests? What is kind of important about them legally, at any rate? Legally, if you're unaware, protests are constitutionally protected. It's an activity that's protected by the First Amendment, which is the people have the freedom to assemble and petition their government for changes. Essentially, that is a protected, basically, a right bestowed upon the American citizenry. And interestingly, we're seeing some of these rights violated, obviously. And these constitutional protectors, they call themselves, or on the right, they're like, I believe in the Constitution. I stand for it. You can't tell, you would never, see me not standing for the Constitution and not agreeing with it and not, saying that we need to protect it per se. I don't see them anywhere regarding these protests. In fact, a lot of them are like, yay, good job, federal government, good job. We agree with you basically beating the heck out of protesters or, gassing them. It's a lot. So protests are still happening, during which Donald Trump, who is a president, called in federal police. And these federal police were used essentially in DC. It's kind of like a trial run. That's what they say. That's what the administration is saying. It was a trial run, and their justification for it was because DC, if you are unaware, doesn't have statehood. It is actually run by the federal government. I think they have a non-voting congresswoman, but that's it. And so they don't really have the same protections as other states do regarding their own ability to basically redress the federal government for any changes or violations. These people are from, or these police are from various agencies, but they're primarily from Customs and Border Patrol, or CBP. Now, CBP is not trained in the things we've been seeing as of late. In Portland, we see them using very hostile techniques against the protesters. Why am I being generous to these people? Like, they're basically beating the shit out of protesters, whether they fire a bullet at a non killing bullet, non-harmful, a safe bullet at protesters and bash that protester's skull in, or gas them, or beat the shit out of somebody with batons, breaking their hand. They clearly aren't trained in kind of controlling protesters. There's also a question here of jurisdiction. At least in Portland, they are in Portland, if I didn't mention. There's a question of whether they're allowed to even be there. And so it's kind of a yes and no answer to this. So a bit ago, the laws basically said, or I guess it was maybe a regulation or a rule, I don't know what it is, basically gave permission to expand what the border was in the United States and so it basically stated that the border, or CBP, has agency in that area 100 miles away from any border crossing or ocean. And Portland does fall within that 100 miles. But Portland, it has a state government. And so the federal government is supposed to abide by the state government's laws, basically. One of their laws is that the police must be trained by them, by whoever they select, and basically to police in the state. It has to go through training by the Oregon Police Agency or whatever it is, which CPP has not done. Yet they're acting like a police force in this location. They also have to basically, if they don't do that, what they do, if they arrest anybody, they have to go straight to a magistrate, which is a judge, and they are not allowed to hold them. I don't know why, but that is by state law. If any federal troop were to come in, they're not allowed to hold them, but they can do the arrests only if they see a federal crime occurring, or a crime occurring, like they are literal witnesses to a crime, or they suspect a crime. They do an investigation and suspect a crime is about to occur. That is the only means of apprehending anybody per Oregon state law. So why are they there? Donald Trump says it's to protect federal buildings. There are federal buildings in Portland. They are there they're protecting them, but they so clearly we have video evidence of this, have expanded that idea of what a federal building is to basically any building, I guess. And so they're not just protecting the federal buildings, they're basically going after protesters. They have been kidnapping, essentially, protesters. They have been holding protesters against their state law. Also, state law says that if you operate as a policing force in our state, Oregon, in the state of Oregon, you must have an identification so that people know your name, know who you are, know your badge number, all of those things, so that the people can say, hey, person X violated my rights. Please do something about this, state of Oregon. They have to have identifiers, of which these federal agents, federal police, do not. They have nothing on to be able to identify them. So essentially, it may appear like, you're just getting kidnapped by a bunch of people in BDUs. I think they're being kidnapped for no reason to begin with. What's the real point here? What is the whole purpose of doing this? Of sending these people to these locations in the first place? And the Oregon state government has rightfully argued that it's a means of intimidation. They're trying to intimidate their citizenry so that they do not actually participate in their constitutionally protected rights. So people who may have joined the protests maybe won't anymore, because they're afraid of getting kidnapped by masked people in riot gear and BDUs. It's a legit argument to be made, and it's sound. They're in the process, or they have sued the federal government to get them out. They have already said they don't want these agents here. Trump doesn't care. He said, I don't care, I'm going to keep them there. And not only that, he's going to expand them. So one region is Chicago. We're hearing things about him wanting to expand these agents to Chicago for the reasoning of there's just high crime there. Of course, recently, if you've been looking at any crime statistics, you'd know that, one, Chicago isn't very high on the list as far as crimes are concerned. They're not like in the top 5 for sure. And two, the crime rate in Chicago has been going down. In fact, all crime has been going down, especially since the 90s. The 90s, it was like peak crime, apparently. But so crime rates have significantly dropped. So it seems like there's a different motivation here as far as why the CPB is there in the first place and why they're getting deployed in other areas. And I don't know if this is true or not, but and someone can let me know, because I'm not very good with estimating distances, right? Quickly. But how far is Chicago from a border? Is it within that 100-mile zone or radius? Because I know the majority of American citizens do fall within that 100-mile zone, but I don't know if Chicago specifically does. It seems like it might. Let's see. Okay, Brad Bloom adds that another horrifying aspect of this is in the Pacific Northwest, there are significant pockets of white supremacy groups who also dress in camo. So people are rightly afraid they're being taken by random psychos. Yeah, And that's why it's um, it's obviously problematic for one, because you shouldn't be able to kidnap citizens and hold them against their will, um, and not identify yourself. It almost allows these white supremacist groups to do the same thing or to work in the same manner. I don't think they necessarily will, just because they don't have the same policing protections that any federal or state police has. One of them is immunity or qualified immunity. What's it called? It's immunity against being sued, essentially, if they kill somebody, um, unarmed or otherwise. They can be sued, but you have to sue the department, the state, the feds, and taxpayers will pay the settlement if there is one, not that individual who committed that crime. So these people, white supremacists in BDUs that are not associated with the cops here, don't have that. So they would be particularly vulnerable to not that occurring, to being sued, basically. And the federal government may actually even be, I guess, a witness or a the legalese here. They may be a part of it. They may be knowingly adding these people who aren't police whatsoever. And if that's the case, you have mercenary group essentially doing the work with the federal government. And again, they don't have that protection, but it certainly could happen. Okay, so Brad Bloom also adds that this should be the argument ender scenario as to why the Patriot Act needs to go. Because as I understand it, that is what is technically allowing this horrific stuff. And formerly Rod Line adds that the Patriot Act is a prime example of giving up freedom for security. You wind up no more secure and less free. Correct. I think the Patriot Act was one of the many, I guess, straws on the camel's back that broke it, type of thing. It was a huge straw in regards to how CPB came about. They didn't exist before 9/11. They were created to exist, to specifically do policing of the border, which was not done before. There was a different agency that kind of handled border crossings, and all they did was basically, if a immigrant came to the United States but didn't use the official channels, they would just say, hey, you either need to get a green card, you either need to get a visa, or you need to be sponsored by a family member. And often immigrants do have family members in the United States. So that was that. It was more of a state, a community thing, a community policing. Hey, your community is responsible for this immigrant now, not us. That's how they handled that at the time. Anthony Lyon says that Trump cited 40 U.S. Code 11315, Homeland Security Act of 2002. Yeah, I don't know what he was citing there, or what he's trying to cite, because I don't know what that is saying. Sorry, again. So we've got a problem on our hands. And one, I have to ask, what is the health of the state currently? The United States. When I mention the state, I mean like the government, the societal structure, things like that. Where is it at? Is it in decline? Will it collapse? Has it collapsed? Another interesting question so I've heard this take that okay, the US government is trying to basically intimidate these protesters in order to create an insurgent group so that a civil war can take place. I don't think that's the case. I think this is more of a rule by fear tactic. I think the insurgency already won in the US. I think it was more the corporate version. The let me go back so I can say it properly. The where is it? Commercialists, not the corporatists. The commercialists, just based off the motivations themselves, based off of the continual defunding and I guess with the Trump administration, in some cases, obliteration of important public services and functions like the EPA, for instance. They were substantially defunded under the Trump administration to the point where they aren't able to do their job. They can't have people, monitor corporations because they can't pay anybody to do that. So essentially, the agency's dead in the water. It only exists in name right now. So, but the EPA served an important public function, which was to keep the citizenry healthy as much as possible and not poisoned by corporations that want to dump their junk into the waterways. I think there was recently the Trump administration has basically what did he do to the waterways? Did something as like removed waterway protection in various locations and their and how they are defined because that matters. Sometimes if the waterway is classified as a wetland, for instance, it is protected under the EPA, under federal jurisdiction protections. They aren't allowed to sign off on corporations basically either building in those areas, dumping in those areas, but Donald Trump has removed that protection from the waterways, allowing them to be poisoned, allowing the citizenry to be poisoned. They will. There's a lot of things that have happened, that have been happening over time. And I don't think they're interested in creating an insurgent group. I think they're more interested in ruling by fear. Because in a weird way, I feel like they've already got what they want, which the ability to maintain wealth, gain wealth, and have resources. I don't know. What do you guys think? What should we do? Yeah, so Sean Hensley mentions that corporate personhood was established in the late 1800s or early 1900s with Santa Clara v. Union Pacific RR Railroad. Yeah, don't underestimate the power of corporations for sure. It was a definition of personhood. It was solidified over several different acts and eventually by the Supreme Court, to where now they get legal protections like like a person, but they don't have the legal repercussions like a person. So it's almost like, I don't know, corporations aren't people. Anthony Leon says, I don't know. I mean, they still have to get the citizenry on board, though, because there's a whole lot of unrest going on right now. Right. Yeah. And that's one thing that I was questioning because of the civil unrest that I guess everybody, even if you're not participating in it, you can sense it, you can feel it, you know something's off. There is a lot of civil unrest. And this is kind of where I'm thinking that if they want to collapse society, essentially transfer it to a different form of society, they like say de-democratize it. They want to create maybe an authoritarian dictatorship. A civil war would give them that power to do so, essentially. The civil unrest would give them that power, like ramped up to like 1,000, of course, would give them that power to do so. And they would thus be legitimized by the international community as well, because once a war happens, the international community knows that they're going to apply or have to basically assure, even though they won't be able to, that human rights violations don't occur, and that there obviously is, if a civil war happens, there obviously is two factions of government at play that could win out, and they can stand up on their own. That's an insurgency. I guess a legitimized insurgency. They have to have the ability to be a state, which they have. I don't think the opposition has that. They could say it all till they're blue in the face, but I just don't think the opposition is that organized. I don't think that if the opposition won today, how would we, provide, what is the, how would we protect the citizenry? How would we, assure that essential services are, I guess, established for the citizenry? Like, who are we putting in charge of that? I don't know. So that's why I don't believe that they could even create an insurgency group, because that organization just isn't there. I'm trying to kind of catch up so that I can kind of understand, so I can read some comments off here. Okay, so Sean Hensley says that they only tolerate the masses as long as they need us. Soon they won't need us, or soon they will not need us. I think possibly. I think it's more of that they don't care. They just want control. So if they will still need people to control in order to have that control, but need of people isn't necessarily a thought, if that makes sense. I think it's more of a, they're there, but what we want is money and power and resources. And if they're the ones giving it to us, so be it. We're gonna we need them in that sense. But if they died, then okay, who cares? I think it's more of a that thing going on. I don't know if you have been hearing rumblings of this either, but I've heard from intense right-wingers that they're ready for a civil war to happen. And guys, I would do everything in my power to prevent that from happening, because of the fact that in every war, any war, the people that are most affected by it are the disenfranchised, are the ones that are in minority groups, are the elderly, the disabled, children. These people in any war are affected a lot, sometimes the most, but specifically in a civil war, they no doubt are affected the most. You will lose more citizens than you will lose soldiers. There's obviously a ramp up of human rights violations during civil wars against common citizenry, sometimes against soldiers, but the vast majority of those violations occur against people that aren't in the fight. So I would do everything in my power to prevent a civil war from occurring. I don't think the country is ready for a civil war. I don't think there's an opposing side for that to even take place. They may say there is, but there isn't. Civil wars, again, require that structure. So I don't think an insurgent group, I've heard people say, well, they're trying to create an insurgent group in Portland by doing this. I just don't see that happening. Maybe I'm wrong. They are obviously able, because of these violations from the federal government, they have gained more sympathizers. More people have gone to the protests. More people have gotten involved. And they're doing so based off of not even the original purpose of the protests to begin with. They saw a violation that impacted their morals, essentially. I think you had those moms, I don't know, it's a moms group who moved to the front lines to participate in the protests. You're seeing veterans of the military starting to participate in these protests. And again, they're not doing so for the initial reason. The initial reason is a great thing. They obviously don't oppose the initial reason, but they're not there because of the initial reason. So maybe the federal government is attempting to create an insurgent group, an insurgency group. I think again, the fact that these troops or police, cops, federal police are being deployed in various other regions of the country, particularly cities run by liberals, not conservatives, is telling. I think it's more of a thing that they're doing to suppress people so that they don't go out of their homes. Maybe it's a voter intimidation technique, even, possibly. I don't know. But what we do know is that they are there for nefarious purposes. Formerly Rod Line says, "This is why the world is crazy and why I like to hear all sides. Just earlier, I heard a right-wing YouTuber saying the protests were driving people to seek law and order." I mean, what law and order, right? Maybe they're seeking what they believe is the law, and the order of that law, which would be to protect the Constitution and the constitutional rights of people. That could be law and order in that context. Or this right-wing YouTuber may be referring to the CPB that have come in to establish law and order within a peaceful protest. Sure, there are some protesters that have been antagonistic, but not particularly violent. You're not supposed to legally. You cannot attack everybody because of the behavior of a few. You cannot violate the rights of everybody because of the behavior of an individual. But that is what is happening. Everybody's a target. And legally speaking, that's like illegal. And it's not supposed to be happening, but it is happening. And this is, yeah, Bob Shuley. Y'all, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, let me know, because I do want to get it right. I think it's respectful. It's a respectful endeavor to try to get your screen names as accurate as possible. But Bob Shuley mentions that, oh, where is it? Bro, when Barack Obama was president and the Ferguson riots happened, he sent federal cops in armored vehicles with fully automatic machine guns on them. These guys only have tear gas and paintball guns. I think that we saw some of this ramping up during the Obama administration. They were sent, they were identifiable too. They were sent with the permission of the state, and they were sent with the permission of the local government as well, which did not happen, is not happening in Portland and Oregon, just at large. They actually want the opposite to occur, which is they want CPB to cease and desist and get lost. Chicago, they do not have the permission of the Chicago government to do that. They don't have the permission of the state of Illinois to move in, but it's happening anyways in violation of their state law. So that's just something to keep in mind when we're comparing administrations. I think that it was a little bit heavy-handed, of course, that Obama did that. It was more than heavy-handed at, gosh, my words are escaping me today. What is it? Standing Rock. It was more than heavy-handed there. Somebody, I think, lost an eye. And it was done by primarily private contractors at the behest of the overarching government, at the behest of the corporation, actually. And so these things aren't happening in a vacuum, obviously. These things didn't poof out of nowhere. There were signs of this happening, but I feel like so many people just didn't react, didn't notice even. There's an argument happening right now in the comment section, I believe, that the distinction of lethal force and the distinction between like force, just general, I think, that Obama sent in like lethal force troops, which I don't even know if that's true. Somebody should check that if that's true. If Obama did send in troops with with the capability of utilizing lethal force, because again, these people are not trained in protest control. They're not trained even in riot control. They're trained to apprehend immigrants, essentially. That's what they're there for. They're trained for that. So somebody should check that. Sean Hensley also says that until humans do away with the notion of private ownership of resources, this will keep happening. Yeah, it will. And also what needs to occur is the idea of scarcity, of resource limitations, because we are in a state of history, if you will, where we can generate all the resources we want. And we can even do so without harming the planet, believe it or not. A lot of people are like, there's just too many people on the planet regarding climate change. There's just too many people on the planet. If people stopped having babies, then, you know, climate change would be fine. We wouldn't have a problem. We're running out of room, which isn't true. The vast majority of land on the earth is uninhabited. So we have not run out of room, if anybody makes that argument. Brad Bloom, I'm sorry. Brad Bloom says the Obama administration definitely didn't stop the human rights abuses at Standing Rock. They may not have ordered it, but they didn't stop it either. Yeah, I feel like that was the key thing there, is that they had some ability to actually stop what was happening and stop the attacks against peaceful protesters. They were nothing but peaceful protesters. And even if they weren't, it didn't justify, you cannot justify using that type of force against those protesters. Even if you want to say it was a riot, it still doesn't justify it. Because there are other means and methods. If you are trained in riot control specifically, there are other means and methods you should employ first before you ever use anything that shoots out of your weapon or firearm. Before you ever even use tear gas, yeah, you should do everything in your power to not use those things. Let's see. That's a weird. I don't know. What are you guys talking about? I watched Bob Shelling. I watched a live stream for 4 straight hours the other day. So multiple large stones, capital, thrown at least 20 or 30. I saw at least 5,285 fireworks thrown. Come on, man. I don't know what this means or something, but again, if small, I mean, throw all the rocks you want. A rock is not the equivalent of a firearm, period. Is not the equivalent of gas that's being used. And you're talking about people that are potentially, other than maybe having a helmet and a mask because COVID, are dressed kind of like me, like I'm dressed right now. Maybe they have a sweater on. You're talking about people that are even unarmed. And so if you want to consider a rock an armament, then I think anything could be an armament. Why can't, this little curly thing that makes my hair look better, if I toss it at a police officer, it's now a weapon. How absurd is that? They have armor on. They have means of protecting themselves. They should know the means to protect themselves. And they should have that ability to do so. I doubt any police officer there was fazed by a stone or a rock being thrown upon them. I doubt that a police officer was was bothered by fireworks being shot. It's just a firework. They are not lethal by any means. But the amount of force they have used doesn't justify anything that has happened, in my mind at least. And might I add that because of it's in our Constitution that you cannot punish the acts of the few on the many, against the many. And you cannot prevent the many from performing or from participating in what is considered a constitutional right. You cannot prevent them from doing so based off of the behavior of a handful, the few. The majority is vastly peaceful. They haven't done anything other than show up with a sign, ooh, dangerous. But they are also being attacked by these officers that have come in that are not trained in protest control. They're not trained in riot control. So they are coming in and attacking peaceful protesters, thus preventing the peaceful protesters from doing something that is a right to them per the Constitution. Lonely Flower Pot says, rioting is the language of the unheard. Yes, I love that quote. That is one of the best quotes I can that I think about all the time. It's by MLK, by the way, if you don't know. But I think it does basically show, or it's such a simple line that says so much. It says there is a set of people, at least, that feel like, regardless of what they have done prior, they have petitioned their government in every formal way, in every peaceful way possible. But those have failed. And now, even though the peaceful protests may have failed and a riot occurs, yes, it's saying that there is a set of people that have gone unheard, and maybe it's time to hear them. I think that would be that quote says so much, and it basically says all of that in such a simple way. Okay, this is one of the best screen names ever. And it makes me laugh every time. Stripper Liquor. I see you guys are kind of arguing against Bob here. Stripper Liquor says, Bob, you seem to be repeating the right-wing propaganda talking points. Have you bothered watching videos or commentaries supplied by independent media? Yeah, I think so too. And the problem with that line of thinking, with right-wing talking points on this issue, is that they forget, or they conveniently forget, about the fact that the many shouldn't be punished because of the few. That I keep reiterating this. They think that, oh, because one person, threw a bottle, everybody should be gassed. That is legally not supposed to happen. That is interpreted as a form of intimidation in order to prevent the many from participating in their constitutionally protected right, which is what's happening. So Bob Shuley says, getting hit with a brick in the face isn't too bad with your right. Yeah, getting hit with a brick in the face doesn't matter. These people still have a right to protest. It's in the Constitution. It doesn't say, you have a right to assemble unless you throw a brick and it has hit somebody in the face. You're not allowed to protest under those circumstances. It doesn't say that. It says that everybody has that right to do that. Formerly Rod Line. Yeah, I'm about to shut off the stream. This was a lot of stuff, and formerly Rod Line is signing off. He says, or they say, they say, thanks, Amanda, for another good conversation. Yeah, so you are very much welcome. What I'm kind of thinking this can be a kind of a loose series of conversations that we can continue to have, that I will continue to operate as a live stream. Let me know if that's what you'd like to do. It's not happy conversations, unfortunately, but I do want to address more aspects of maybe behaviors that could occur when maybe a society is collapsing or has collapsed. So I think it would be an interesting route to follow. There was a lot of information I was not able to convey with the limited time I had. I essentially wrote a book with notes. So I'd like to share the book with you guys, but I'm going to have to break it up. So we'll continue talking about that if you want to. We don't have to. So let me know in the comments again if that's what you want. It won't be necessarily in order, because I will definitely have a gap where I'm going to do that premiere video and have my special guest on. So the first week of August, I believe, that's going to happen. And I'm super excited about it. So I hope you guys catch that as well. But I won't be doing or talking about a societal collapse during that time, obviously. We'll be talking about what we just watched. So, yay! Okay. Thank you guys so much. And I hope I was able to at least read someone's comments. At some point, who participated in the stream. If not, you're more than welcome to comment below, continue commenting below. If you think that anything that I said was relevant or important, or even not important, just decent to listen to, even though I stutter over all my words, share the video, guys. I work very hard to sit down here and talk to you guys. Well, I did a lot of research, so I worked hard in doing that. I will talk to you guys later. Next week, I will do another live chat, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Alrighty, I always forget where the end stream button is. Bye, you guys.